2022 has been a big year for games with names that end in West. Horizon Forbidden West, Hard West 2, Weird West, and the last horse to cross the post, Evil West. That's the game we're going to review the reviews of today. Why don't we jump in and have a look? For reviews in review, we're still using a combination of OpenCritic and MetaCritic, and we haven't really delved into why I like OpenCritic more than MetaCritic. But Evil West actually provides us with an opportunity to do exactly that. Evil West was released on 5 different platforms: PC, PS5, PS4, Xbox Series X, and Xbox One X. And Metacritic splits the reviews out across the platforms. OpenCritic doesn't. So while you'll see the bulk of the reviews on Metacritic for Evil West on PC, because it's the primary platform of the game, there are actually extra reviews across other platforms. Whereas if you go to OpenCritic, it's sort of just all in one bucket. I think this is significantly more readable, and it also, the split on Metacritic isn't really necessary anymore, right? It used to be that, I mean, in the PlayStation 3 days, right, the PlayStation cell architecture meant that it required a significantly different amount of work to actually run games. You couldn't just port across like between platforms easily. With the PlayStation 4, Sony made a concerted effort to change that, and with the PlayStation 5, we've reached a place where now the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X are basically computers. You know, like you still require, there is still effort required, and the console manufacturers have different standards compared to, you know, anyone can release a game on PC, but on a console it has to go through a certification process, but fundamentally they're built on the same architecture all the way down, and so the process is quite similar. It's more a question of hardware limitations. You'll get a better performance out of a console version of a game because the developers were able to sort of target everything. So they know what specs a console is capable of, right? They know the PlayStation 5 is capable of running everything on, let's say, high with shadows on ultra, and that's the perfect blend between performance and fidelity that makes it look fantastic and runs at a lock, stock, steady rate the whole time. And same with the Xbox. Whereas PC, you're allowed to go in and do whatever the hell you want, and sometimes it's a nightmare, and sometimes you break everything, and sometimes the game's just been released in a state that is woeful, but they made $1 billion anyway. What's fun about that gag is you can't tell if I'm talking about Call of Duty or Pokemon. Fantastic. The state of video games. Anyway, I've digressed. Metacritic splits those reviews. I don't think they need to anymore. OpenCritic doesn't. So it's easier to read. I think they've got a page system on OpenCritic that I don't like for the purposes of making these videos, but it is easier to just sort of go through reviews. And typically, when I'm just reading reviews, as I like to do, I read them via OpenCritic first. You also get more reviews on OpenCritic. It's easier to get your reviews listed on OpenCritic than it is on Metacritic. Metacritic sort of, I'm not sure if this is still the case, but they used to actively seek out publications, whereas OpenCritic, you can apply to be a publication. Metacritic also weights reviews from certain publications. So in the case of, let's say, IGN has a weighting of 1.04, then their 9.5 is actually more worth like closer to a 9.8, right? And that's a completely made up example, right? But because nobody knows the weighting on Metacritic, which is part of the problem. But that sort of thing goes on. Some publications' reviews mean more. Now, that is actually also the case on OpenCritic, right? They have a trusted critics system, a top critic system. And that system is actually used to determine the average that they show everyone by default. So when you see that Evil West, the game we're talking about, has a 76 on OpenCritic, that's only from the top critics. And that's an important distinction, because it sort of looks like they also have a weighted system, but they don't. Every single top critic is weighted the same. All of their scores mean the same as every other score. It's just that they only take from the selected top critics, and anyone can become a top critic. They just need to demonstrate a certain degree of professionalism, which involves grammar. It involves repeatedly doing the work, like continuous reviews, a large library of reviews to refer back to, that kind of thing. So anyone can become a top critic. I mean, I'm listed as a top critic, and I'm the worst. Anyway, that's how we wind up with 41 reviews on Metacritic for Evil West, but 46 on OpenCritic. It's got a 74 on Metacritic and a 76 on a 74, and a 74 if we take the scores for all the platforms and sort of combine them, about a 74. I don't know the weighting, and I've removed. There are some repeated reviews. Some people reviewed it on both PC and PS5. I removed those. We wind up with 41 reviews. OpenCritic gives us 46. I prefer the percentage of critics recommending. So that says 63% of critics recommend it. This is closer to the Rotten Tomatoes system that my co-host on the GameSpot has pitched for years, where it just takes recommended or not recommended as a percentage base. And I prefer that immensely, but it also removes any problems with top critics. That takes from the broad range, not just top critics. So 46 reviews total, and 74 to 76 on scores, but 63% recommend Evil West. Why don't we take a look at the high scores first and see how this one pans out? Alrighty, the highest score that Evil West got was a 9. It got 2 9s, which, considering we do 2 of the highest scores, that suits our purposes pretty perfectly. We'll just grab the 2 9s. The first, I almost said cab off the rank, but I didn't. The first one is WellPlayed Ash Wayling. Gave it a 9 out of 10 on WellPlayed. That means it's a bloody ripper. It's an Australian site. If you're not familiar with the concept of what a bloody ripper is, that's a good thing. Let's take a look at the pull quote. Evil West might wear old school clothes, but under the hood, it's a modern stunner. Gorgeous and gutsy, the tale of Jesse Rentier paints a dark world where the best way to illuminate your path is by way of a shocking Tesla-powered knuckle duster. It deftly navigates some of the pitfalls that are to be expected when forging a new IP and drops a winning hand that is more aces than eights. I like this. It's folksy. It's, intriguing. It's very positive. I think it's a good conclusive paragraph, really. I can't tell if I love the wordplay between the Tesla gauntlet or the Tesla powered knuckle duster and the poker hand, because obviously they're both hand related. I can't tell if I love that or hate it, but it's got me feeling a ways. Yeah, I don't know. I'm keen to check out more of this review. Let's take a look at a paragraph from within. I love cowboy games. There's something groovy about the 1800s frontier fantasy where dudes were easily identified as a bad guy because of their black hat and mustache, and the solitary white-hatted bloke sitting alone at the bar was not to be trifled with. Towns were smaller back then, barely big enough for the two of us, and especially not sized appropriately for vampires and other such monstrous Mother Hubbards. What I like most about cavorting as a cowboy is when the game doesn't take itself too seriously, cough, Red Dead Redemption 2, and instead simply wants to thrill you with being the baddest boot-scooting badass in the wicked Wild West. This is where Evil West has staked its claim, and it is striking it rich. The dig at Red Dead Redemption 2 might make me want to draw down on Ash right there, but the rest of this paragraph is fantastic. I think it really lays out that how Ash likes their, the Red Dead Redemption 2 thing is part of this. It lays out that Ash likes their westerns to be of the traditional sense, none of this revisionist spaghetti nonsense. They want good guys and bad guys having a shootout at the OK Corral. They're pretty clear and pretty upfront about what they want. The review itself, the rest of it is fantastic. It's extremely detailed. It's probably my favorite of the reviews from this week. It's just loads of detail, loads of passion. It's very, very clear to me that Wayling really enjoyed this game and really appreciated what they were trying to do. All right, well, let's take a look at the other 9 from TheBetaNetwork. Dillon van der Putten gave it a 9 out of 10. They didn't have a charming catchphrase for what a 9 represents. Let's have a look at the paragraph. Evil West is an incredibly fun game with many ways to dismember enemies or electrocute them with gusto. The story flows very well from mission to mission, and the boss battles are incredibly engaging. The world also looks stunning, being drenched in a gothic steampunk atmosphere that's highly rewarding to play. Does this read like it's out of order? Like, boss battles should be highly rewarding, right? And the gothic steampunk atmosphere could be incredibly engaging. I don't know. Like, it feels like half of those sentences got swapped around at some point. I don't know. Very short, very sharp sentences. I'm expecting a short review. And yeah, let's take a look. The story, although interesting, is relatively basic. There are several intriguing characters with their own backstories, although the narrative itself is mostly surface level. It has some compelling characters and evil beings moving you along from mission to mission seamlessly. However, that is all it does. It is used to move the game forward. Still enjoyable, but not the best story around. It was actually a pretty short review. I grabbed this paragraph because it sort of shows how the conclusion can lead you astray, right? Like when they said above that the story flows well from mission to mission in the conclusive paragraph, I took that to mean that Dillon thought the story was good. That doesn't appear to be the case. Yeah, I don't know. They don't really care for the story at all. This is going to sound harsh, but I don't know. This review was kind of like how TBN found Evil West's story. It felt pretty surface level. I will point out, though, that the screenshots they chose to use were extremely ugly, and that made me chuckle quite a bit. Anyway, let's check out the middle scores. For the middle scores, we've got a range below 9 and above 7, and we've got 35 reviews to choose from. If you care about how the RNG worked out, I don't know if anyone does, but I figured I'd chuck it in there anyway. We landed on 6 and 12 to get these reviews. It was accurate at time of making this video. I don't know if it still will be when you watch it, because I don't know when you're going to watch it. Anyway, we've got the 2 reviews. Wccftech got Kai Powell to review it, and they gave it an 8.2. Here's their paragraph. With a flow of combat that rivals that of the Doomslayer, Evil West hits its mark when taking on vampires, werewolves, and everything in between, despite finding the rest of the experience a bit lacking. I'm intrigued to find out what the rest of the experience entails, but I found this to be a little bit of a clunky sentence or paragraph. Is it? It's one sentence? Yeah, it's one sentence. It's a little bit clunky. Could have been 2 sentences, and they could have clarified what everything else in between means. Like, what's between a vampire and a werewolf? Is there much room between those two? I'm not up on Twilight, so I don't really know the details of the lore between vampires and lycanthropes, and I assume that's the prevailing vampire mythology of today, because yeah, I don't really pay that much attention to vampires. Let's have a look at the review. Much of the path through each level in Evil West is a linear bit of exploration with some light puzzle solving or platform pushing to reach the next objective. Anytime there's the possibility of a branching path, take it. These almost always lead towards gold to invest in gear upgrades, cosmetic enhancements, unique skill unlocks, and very occasionally an overcharged health pickup that gives Jesse a shield lasting his entire health bar, which typically means there's a boss fight coming up soon. Glowing chains and posts often indicate a one-way forward to reach the next destination, but players can go back and replay previous levels just by jumping into the lore menu, so nothing left behind is truly lost or missable. This sort of makes the game sound like hyperlinear to me. Like this paragraph in particular, like there's no real way else to go, and these very obvious diversions lead immediately to pickups, and they always lead to pickups. And the idea of the glowing chains indicating a one-way forward, like as a one-way road, I think that's a very clever way to make sure people don't accidentally lock themselves out of or missing stuff. But at the same time, I don't know, as an immersive experience, that doesn't sound good to me. It sounds like you just sort of, oh, well, that's a path off to the right, and it doesn't have glowing chains, so it's going to have some gold down it. And I don't know, that doesn't sound great. But the review itself, like, I think it was pretty good. They clearly appreciated what Evil West was trying to do, and they try to link it to Doom Eternal and 2016 as examples of games that also do it right. I don't think what they described in that paragraph doesn't sound like what I recall of Doom. You know, even like Doom throughout the ages has always had actual secrets. You couldn't just go down the unexpected path and find something. You usually had to punch a wall or something, you know. So like, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I thought the review was good. Like in general, a lot of detail. Kai very clearly enjoyed the game, and they analyzed it deep, like the combat especially. I think Kai really got involved with, because there is loads of analysis on it. It's a good one to read if you want to get an idea of how it plays from a combat perspective. Next up, we've got Chris Shive from HardcoreGamer, and they gave the game a 4 out of 5, which equates to an 8 or an 80%. Evil West deserves a spot among the best games that take place in the Wild West. This isn't the first time cowboys have faced off against vampires, but this is one of the better attempts at fusing the opposing genres. From the time Evil West sinks it in its teeth, it immediately becomes a game that's difficult to put down. The story is told through cutscenes that are long enough to get the point across without affecting the pacing. The real star of Evil West is the combat, where using the obscene amount of firearms strapped to Jesse's back to supplement melee attacks couldn't have felt more intuitive. Not everyone is a fan of westerns or horror, but anyone who's a fan of either owes it to themselves to play Evil West. With a 4 out of 5, either Chris Shive doesn't think much of games that take place in the Wild West, or they didn't do the score for this. I don't know. It's like that first sentence, among the best games that take place in the Wild West. It's not exactly a it's not exactly an empty genre. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I like some of the wordplay in this conclusive paragraph. There are a couple of spelling errors, but that's okay. That'll get fixed. That's the magic of the internet. Yeah, I think it's got me intrigued to see how they come to the conclusion that it's one of the best Wild West games. Let's have a look. The technical quality of the graphics helps bring the nightmarish world of Evil West to life. The environments are gorgeous to behold with impressive attention to detail, like paths being made in the snow when Jesse walked through it. Other environments are infested with giant spiders, which is less pleasant to behold, but for true arachnophobes, there's an option to turn off spiders. The music out in the frontier was atmospheric and tense to help create a sense of dread, while upbeat piano music made things seem happier in the bar. The game mechanics contribute the feeling of being unstoppable, where Jesse can quickly dodge across the arenas to avoid deadly attacks while effortlessly attacking with all his assorted weapons. A couple more typos here. From the full review, I get the feeling that Shive was talking about the Weird West genre, that which is, a sort of blend of Wild West and horror that has sort of been getting a little bit of traction recently. Not the Weird West game that I mentioned earlier, which was good, needed some work, but was good. But an entire genre based on this blend between spooky stuff and cowboys. Yeah, I grabbed this paragraph because I don't know, I like the noting of the arachnophobic setting. I like when games do that, and it always sort of speaks to an attention to detail from the developers, that they know that the spider-like beings that they've made are spooky enough that people want to be able to reduce that similarity, because arachnophobia messes people up. I thought this paragraph went all over the place a little bit. It took us on a bit of a journey, but the most notable thing was that they didn't experience any technical hitches, which will come into play later. Yeah, otherwise, yeah, let's move on to the Unscored reviews. All right, the Unscored reviews, there were 7 of them, and we landed on number 5. Zack Zwiezen from Kotaku gives us our Unscored review. Let's take a look. For me, Evil West is the kind of game I miss these days. I'll fully admit I love games like Destiny and Fortnite, games that never end and are filled with battle passes, crafting, loot, etc. Those games can provide hours of fun and are great to play while chilling with friends or listening to a podcast. But I don't want everything to be a complex, all-encompassing, time-monopolizing social experience that continues to grow and evolve as time goes on. And Evil West is a wonderful example of the kind of games I want more of moving forward. Not everything needs an endgame or a crafting table. Sometimes I just want to move forward, hear some bad banter, and punch some monsters in the face for a few hours. And Evil West gave me exactly that. No more, no less. Yeah, there are like 40 million games that do that, Zach. You are not wanting for choice in that department. Bog standard games are sort of the bog standard for a reason. There are even like really good ones that do exactly that. Like there are even really good ones that came out in the last month that do exactly that. Like potential game of the year candidates that do exactly what you want and last a lot longer than Evil West does. Yeah, I don't know. And like I fundamentally disagree with this idea of pitching that complexity is some sort of B-movie monster that's threatening to grow and grow out of control until it encompasses us all. Like complexity is complex. It's difficult to balance, to do correctly, to maintain. I don't think you have to worry, Zach. Let's take a look at a paragraph from this review. Sure, if you look closely, you'll notice the seams and corners that were cut in Evil West, likely due to its smaller budget compared to other single-player action games like God of War. Characters outside of cutscenes don't move their lips when they talk. Audio quality can sometimes dip, and levels only look nice if you don't poke around windows to see beyond the linear area of the mission. But where it matters, Evil West works great. Playing on PS5, I ran the game in its performance mode and found a rock-solid 60 frames per second experience, with only a few dips during one particular moment in one late-game mission. Camera and movement controls are responsive and work fine at all times. This might be a budget game, but Flying Wild Hog spent the money in the right places. Evil West and God of War cost exactly the same if you buy them on PlayStation 4. It's $10 more to get God of War on PlayStation 5. I don't think this is a budget game is a valid reason to dismiss these issues. It's like PlayStation's new pricing scheme aside. It's facile reasoning. Like it doesn't hold up to any scrutiny at all, and I think it might be obvious, but it's a personal pet peeve of mine when it gets trotted out. If it's a budget game, then charge a budget price for it. Like this isn't even analysis. This is more like the reverse of the Monty Python. What did the Romans ever do for us? Like, yeah, sure, the education and medicine and aqueducts, but what have the audio glitches and the levels are shallow linear messes and there's no lip syncing, but what has it Evil West done for us? I don't know. It seems bad to me if during your big, hey, this game's actually really tightly done paragraph, when you talk about the frame rate being solid, you can't help yourself but mention how it's not solid. To me, that seems like a pretty big indicator. I don't know. Like this review reads to me like Zack really enjoyed Evil West, and other people clearly did. They really enjoyed it. It just reads like Zack's not really able to put their finger on what it is they really enjoyed about it. Like it's just beyond their grasp. And so what they're doing is anything they can actually get a hold of, that's what they're using. So they're like, oh yeah, okay, I can admit that this game has problems, right? But it's so good. The camera and movement controls are so responsive. Like, yeah, that is actually not worth mentioning. Camera being responsive should only be mentioned when it's not happening, right? Otherwise, that's the default position. The default position is the camera works. Oh, my Lord. Anyway, I did not like this review, obviously, I think. Yeah, I don't know. No offense to Zack or anything. I just... It didn't sufficiently argue its points to me. Let's move on to the low scores. Alrighty, for our low scores, we grabbed anything below a 7, which gave us 6 scores. I realized earlier I said anything above a 7, and that probably made it sound like 7's got just sort of like left in the cold. I meant 7 and above. It's too late. I'm not going back and re-recording. I don't care. I don't care. This is a 7 out of 10 review. I can cop it. Anyway, actually 7 out of 10? No, 5 out of 10, Job. 5 out of 10. Anyway, we got 6 scores, and one of them was the lowest by far, a 4. And so we rolled between the rest. We got a 3. That gave us Richard Wakeling's 6 out of 10 for GameSpot. Let's take a squiz. In a lot of ways, Evil West feels like a relic of the past. It's the kind of game you could envision playing back in, say, 2010, or perhaps even earlier. This simplicity could have been somewhat refreshing when so many modern games are overly bloated by comparison, but it comes across like a game short on aspiration. Combat is robust, relishes in gore, and constantly delights with its weighty and satisfying action. It stumbles into tedium towards the end, though, both as a result of enemy oversaturation and because it's forced to carry the load. But it's the one aspect that makes Evil West worth playing. The rest of the game is formulaic and mind-numbingly dull, actively diminishing its high points as you saunter from one combat arena to another. I didn't always enjoy my time with Evil West, but I hope a sequel is in the pipeline, if only to see if Flying Wild Hog can expand and improve on its promise. Wow. Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it's interesting that Wakeling went down the same route that Zwiezen did for Kotaku, but at a different angle, like the idea that it could have been a refreshing, a breath of fresh air amongst all these games that are too complex, which I still don't agree with. But yeah, it could have been that, but if it didn't manage to achieve that. And the other thing we know from this is that that Wakeling feels the combat is really good. Really, really good. And also everything else in the game is bad. That's what I get out of this conclusive paragraph. Let's see if it carries over into the review itself. Part of the problem also lies in Evil West's formulaic design. Combat generally takes place within boxed-in arenas denoted by spike traps and TNT. The dull and predictable layout of these areas isn't a significant issue since juggling all of the abilities at your disposal is more than engaging enough. But it's outside of combat where it falters. The main path connecting the game's combat areas is marked with a glowing silver chain. You can duck into barely hidden side passages to find money that's used to upgrade weapons, but this constitutes the lightest of exploration. Most of the time, you're simply moving from one shiny object to another, where you'll then watch Jesse climb up a ledge or squeeze through a gap. It occasionally breaks from the norm, putting you in a perilous minecart ride or impeding your progress with a rudimentary block-pushing puzzle, but these moments are few and far between and are incredibly mundane anyway. There is one level that presents a whole tower for you to explore as you hunt down and destroy a few monster nests. It's not an especially large space, but its newfound freedom does make for slightly more interesting navigation than usual. I thought, damn. This doesn't read like a 6 to me, but I know how GameSpot does scores, so fair enough. I think this is a really good review, right? I actually think it's a really good review because there's lots of analysis, lots of depth to it. But what is clear to me, what makes it really good, is that Wakeling was very clearly bored by Evil West. And instead of allowing that to come through as frustration, what they do is they sort of convey the tedium in a manner that still reads pretty entertainingly, and that is tricky. And I think they did a good job. Yeah, the combat appears to suck, and the combat is good, and everything else sucks. And that's a vampire pun, by the way. I did that on purpose. The lowest score is from comicbook.com. Evan Valentine gave it a 2 out of 5. This should be pretty interesting. This is the lowest score by 2 entire points, and the only score below 5. There's fun to be had in Evil West, but there are too many chinks in this armor to make it worthy of wearing out into the field. I don't know if the medieval knight metaphor really carries. I haven't played enough Evil West to know if medieval knights come into it a lot, but surely there was like, I mean, you know, the poker hand. This is one hand I'd fold or something. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This tells me nothing. I don't. It's a weird. I mean, obviously I didn't like it. Too many chinks in the armor to wear out on the field, but. When I loaded up Evil West on my PlayStation 5, the game hard crashed 5 times for me in the first hour. Delivering a Superman punch to a lowly vampire had both the creature of the night and Jesse launch over a nearby cliff, where I found myself unable to return to the game's path, but rather was trapped in a T-pose before needing to hit the restart button manually to get back into the fight. There were more than a few times in the fights where hit detecting was almost non-existent, especially when it came to fighting larger enemies such as the damaged sponge bat creature. This became particularly frustrating when an enemy was dependent on being electrocuted, as it stood in a pool of water and Jesse would whiff his blows, unable to connect his electric dash to a target that filled the screen. Well, you know, that first sentence explains why this score was below 5. When a game's crashing your console, that's bad. Like I said before, these games go through like certification specifically to avoid this kind of thing. So if there are still bugs that do that, that's a game that's in a bad state. Or your machine is dying. I have heard that has happened to some people before, but I recall I did a review of Hitman Absolution, and I didn't like the game. Ironically, because it was far too linear, just like Evil West appears to be. But and the other thing was that I had to actually unplug my console to be able to like hard reset it because the game crashed my PlayStation so hard. So yeah, that one copped a pretty like negative score. Interestingly, you know, not for nothing, but years later in one of Danny O'Dwyer's no-clip documentaries about Hitman, they admitted that Hitman Absolution wasn't what the game should be. But when I reviewed Hitman Absolution and said it wasn't what the game should be, I did get death threats, which is just how it goes when you're a game reviewer. Actually, I worked at Telstra, which is, if you're not in Australia, a massive telecommunications company. And the website that I ran was under the Telstra banner, and someone emailed the CEO of Telstra asking them to fire me because of the Hitman Absolution review. That happened a couple of times, but incredible stuff. I've fully digressed. Yeah. Basically, Evan had a terrible time with this game, and it's always really tricky to keep your review on the level when it keeps throwing these kinds of problems your way, because invariably you have to redo content, and it makes it easier to see behind the curtain, right? I am generally able to see through a game pretty quickly without having to replay it. But I do find a lot of the time that when I do replay it, it's instant for me, and I find it very difficult to ignore. And it's one of those things where it has to be a really special magic trick to impress someone who knows how the trick is done, you know? And if it's not an especially impressive magic trick, if it's not a very special magic trick, then it's much more difficult. Once they know how it works, it's much more difficult to impress someone who knows what's happening. Anyway, let's go for the conclusion. Well, every review mentioned that Evil West is a linear game with combat that, I mean, even a very low review admitted the combat was great. The more negative reviews said the enemy types don't vary enough for the combat to last the entire length of the game. And the very positive ones, evidently didn't mind that. Most said the story was at best ignorable, but even some of the positive ones said the story was bad. But I would say on measure, most people would like to see, most of these reviewers would like to see an Evil West 2, which I think is interesting. There must be some promise, but you're not buying a game on promise. You're buying a game on execution. So that's always a tricky thing too, because some games won't get a sequel if there aren't enough sales, but also if the only thing going for it is the potential for a sequel, like for the sequel to be much better, then the sales shouldn't come in the first place. It's a catch-22. Yeah, it seems like a game that lives and dies on its combat. So that's what you'd have to base your purchase on. Do you think that combat can last long enough? Do you think the combat looks good enough that you want to be involved with it for 11 hours? That's completely on you. I will say that the PlayStation 5 has God of War Ragnarok, which I'm not the only one. Well, I'm not the one to make this comparison, but God of War and Evil West are very similar, but one of them's 40 hours long and costs $10 more, and there's no direct correlation between game length and price, but one of them is possibly a potential game of the year, and the other one is Evil West. So anyway, it's been another Reviews in Review. Next week, Callisto Protocol, maybe Warhammer Darktide. I'll see how we're going. It might be easier for me to do Darktide than Callisto Protocol, but I am very excited for Callisto Protocol, and I've been enjoying Darktide. You can go listen to my podcast, TheGAPodcast.com, if you want to hear my thoughts on Darktide so far. And yes, stick around. I'm sure we'll talk about Callisto Protocol. Otherwise, what you should do is look at the info down below and go and read all of the reviews that I've listed. I think GameSpot's is fantastic, and WellPlayed. Those are my two picks this week. If you only read two, read those two. Right at the top and right at the bottom. And yeah, I don't know, be cool to everyone. Like and subscribe. Stay safe. And yeah, love you. Bye.